It started like any other quiet morning at Jake Collier's lakeside cabin, the chirping of birds, the scent of pine in the air, and the glistening of the water under the early sun. Jake, a 58-year-old retired civil engineer, had spent the last decade living a peaceful life by the lake, maintaining the bridge he had built himself, a small but sturdy wooden footbridge that led from his private dock to a floating platform he used for fishing and launching his canoe. The bridge wasn't just functional, it was a symbol of everything Jake loved about his life. It gave him access to the deeper parts of the lake, where fish were plentiful and the water was calm. He had built it with his own hands, using high-quality timber and reinforced bolts. It passed every safety check, though no one had officially asked him for one. It was on his own property. At least, that's what he had believed. Then the Homeowners Association got involved. Ever since the HOA board changed hands a year ago, things had gotten more controlling. The new president, a smug man named Richard Holloway, had come from out of state and brought with him a ruthless agenda to modernize and regulate the entire lakeside community. That meant new bylaws, fees, and worst of all, inspections. Jake ignored most of their threats. He wasn't part of the HOA, his property predated its establishment. But Holloway and his board didn't care. They began citing him for everything from unauthorized shoreline structures to violating the aesthetic uniformity of the lakeside community. And then, one morning, Jake came outside and found the bridge gone. Not damaged, not removed and left nearby. Gone, as if it had never existed. At first, he thought maybe a storm had pulled it away, but the weather had been calm. No debris floated in the water. He paced around in confusion until he noticed the tire marks and sawdust. That's when he realized they had taken it. The HOA had hired a contractor to come onto his land and destroy the bridge in the middle of the night. He was furious. He marched into the HOA office that very afternoon, demanding answers. Richard didn't deny it. In fact, he smiled. It was a hazard, Holloway said, leaning back in his leather chair. And it didn't match the natural wood scheme we approved for lakeside structures. Jake's face flushed red. You had no right. That was on my land. Not anymore, Holloway said. Due to an old surveying error, the bridge was technically within the common access zone the HOA manages. We're correcting old boundaries. You'll be getting an adjusted property line map in the mail. Jake stormed out without saying another word, his hands shaking with fury. Over the next few days, he watched from his porch as the HOA installed their own dock nearby, extending it into the lake and adding tiki torches, paddleboards, even a speaker system. It wasn't just a dock, it was the first phase of their new, resort-style common space. Jake's quiet part of the lake was being transformed into a noisy public zone. The worst part, that dock stood just a few feet from the old dam. A dam Jake had helped design, long before he retired. A dam most people didn't even realize was partially on his land. A dam with a hidden manual release valve. They took his bridge, but Jake knew something they didn't. And he was about to remind them that messing with a civil engineer, especially one with access to infrastructure, was a very bad idea. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table, old blueprints spread out beneath the dim overhead light, sipping coffee that had long since gone cold. The dam had always been a point of pride for him, a simple but effective earthen structure reinforced with concrete, designed to control the water level of the lake during spring melts and heavy rains. When the community had been first developed, Jake had been brought in as a consultant. He knew every valve, every lock, every outflow channel like the back of his hand. And he remembered the access hatch hidden beneath the old maintenance shed, which technically still sat on his parcel of land. They might have redrawn the property lines. But they didn't know what they'd built their precious new lakeside resort next to. That dock, that beach bar, the paddleboard rental shack, all of it was just a few feet above the dam's spill basin. And thanks to years of disrepair and budget cuts, Jake knew for a fact that the HOA had never properly inspected the structural integrity of the overflow tunnel. It wouldn't take much. A slow release of the valve would be enough to lower the lake level by 3 or 4 feet overnight. Enough to leave their entire $5 million development sitting in mud. He didn't want to cause damage, not real harm. But they had trespassed, demolished his private property, lied about ownership, and turned his sanctuary into a public circus. If they wanted to claim his land, let them feel the weight of that responsibility. Early the next morning, just before dawn, Jake walked to the back of his property with a flashlight and crowbar tucked into his backpack. The forest was quiet, dew slicking the undergrowth. The maintenance shed was still there, rusted, forgotten, padlocked. But Jake knew the code. It hadn't changed in years. With a twist and a click, the old padlock gave way, and he stepped inside. Dust filled the air as he pried open the trapdoor in the floor. He climbed down the narrow metal ladder into the cool, damp chamber beneath. There, at the end of the passage, was the valve. A thick iron wheel, crusted with age, but still operable. He turned it slowly, steadily. It creaked in protest, but moved. Water began to surge, quiet and controlled, through the secondary channel, the one meant for slow drawdowns. Jake left the chamber and returned home, sitting again on his porch, waiting. By noon, the lake had dropped by over a foot. HOA workers began to notice something was wrong. Paddleboards were grounded. The dock's floating sections tilted awkwardly. The music system shorted from the moisture exposure. By evening, the damage became undeniable. Mud rings encircled the shoreline. Expensive cabanas now sat tilted in the muck. Jet skis were trapped in shallow water, engines choking on silt. Tourists, who had paid for exclusive weekend packages, began to demand refunds. Jake watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. The HOA board scrambled. They blamed weather, blamed erosion, even accused Jake of sabotage, though they couldn't prove a thing. Jake, of course, was ready. He handed them old survey maps, copies of easements, legal documentation of the dam's structure, and the fact that the emergency flood valve lay entirely within his property boundaries. Holloway came storming up to his door that evening, suit pants splashed with lake mud, voice raised. "You think this is over?" he barked. "We're pressing charges. This is ecological destruction." Jake opened the door calmly, holding a folder full of signed permits and inspection forms. "This is flood management," Jake said, cold and even. "Emergency drawdown protocol. Section 9.2b of the original lake management plan. You'd know that, if you'd ever read the documents before bulldozing people's property." Holloway's face went pale. "And I've just sent a copy of all this," Jake continued, "to the county and your insurance providers. You might want to call your lawyer before you call the police." The HOA backed off quickly after that. The resort was shut down for repair and re-evaluation. Several investors pulled out. And Holloway, he quietly resigned from the board within 2 weeks. Jake never rebuilt the bridge. He didn't need to. The lake was quiet again. Peaceful. Just the way he liked it.